Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at a brand new strategy game, one that I've been waiting on for a very long time, and one that I'm very excited to review on this channel, Age of Wonders Planetfall. Before I dive in, I'd like to thank the developers for giving me a review copy so that I can cover the game on the channel. Important to note, we are taking a look specifically at the PC version of the game, and all the footage you're going to see is from the PC version. One final note, if you're interested in picking the game up after the review, consider doing so using the Humble Bundle affiliate link I've included in the description and under the eye at the top right corner of the screen. Doing so supports charity as well as the channel as you buy. Now, as we dive into this review, I want to let everybody know from the onset, this is my first time playing an Age of Wonders game, despite having heard good things about prior titles. With that tedious introduction out of the way, let's dive on in. Is this game truly an Age of Wonders, or is it perhaps an Age of Blunders instead?
Our forces are victorious.
Age of Wonders Planetfall is the 5th Age of Wonders game and the first to dive into the sci-fi genre. The quickest way to summarize the game and its plentiful features is to say that it's a blend of Civilization-style empire building with XCOM-style tactical battles and a fair sprinkling of RPG elements. The single-player campaigns, of which there are 13 plus one tutorial campaign, tell a fairly comprehensive set of stories, putting you in charge of the various factions as you go along, fleshing out their backstories and relationships where needed. Now, these are objective and story-driven campaigns with scripted moments, but a fair amount of opportunity for emergent gameplay, something I'll touch on in a moment. Now, apart from these single-player campaigns, there is the scenario mode as well. This is where you go to set up a game with random map generation, picking from one of many presets that the game has, or from community creations. The multiplayer mode allows for up to 12 players and also uses a similar map generation system. Important to note about the multiplayer mode is that it does allow for asynchronous playing, so that means you can actually play a game without all having to be online at the same time. A great touch, a great inclusion. Now, these two modes, the scenario mode and the multiplayer modes, will have lots of options for victory conditions as well. There's the standard wiping out all the other factions, and there's also the standard diplomatic options, or there is the long process of using the weapon of mass destruction associated with your secret technology. More on that in a bit. The latter two modes allow players to pick from the same 6 factions featured in the campaigns, and each of these 6 factions feels quite fresh. Whether it's the standard human faction of the Vanguard, or the space dwarf miners of the Dvar, or the robot zombies of the Assembly, the money-hungry merchants of the Syndicate, the bioengineering Amazon, or the insectoid hive mind Kirko, all of these factions have very distinct looks and feels to them. They are all very characterful, the art styles are very expressive, and while we've definitely seen similar concepts elsewhere before, I feel like Age of Wonders Planetfall does a great job of translating those concepts into interesting gameplay mechanics, both for empire building and for battling. On top of these 6 factions, you can pick from 6 secret technologies to bring further differentiation between each of the factions within the factions themselves. The secret technologies provide additional options for gameplay, additional victory objectives, or provide a variety of buffs. Now, this can be in the form of anything from diplomacy bonuses to access to bioweapons to the ability to summon ethereal beings to the battlefield or maybe hack enemy mechanical units. They all feel substantially distinct, and I don't think any feel like the lame option. They all have something that makes them cool or special or intriguing. And finally, if that wasn't enough to make the 6 factions feel like far more than 6, you can actually choose and customize your faction leader as well, editing their starting weapons, their starting skills, and even some other character traits that come into play during gameplay. For example, are they a party animal? Are they a bit of a kleptomaniac? There's a little cheeky humor here and there, but this allows you to create a custom character that leads your faction. Now, there are some presets that you can fall back on, but again, you're also able to build from scratch, so you get a leader in a specific faction with a specific secret technology that perfectly lines up with your specific style of play. The level of customization here is just surprising, frankly. There's so many options at a variety of levels, and they're not fake options either. You know, options that aren't really different, just there to fluff up the numbers. No, they actually feel distinct, and that was one of the first things I wanted to sort of take a look at, because many times games say, oh, up to 6 factions, but then it's like 3 of them are the same, and then the others are kind of different. No. These are 6 very distinct factions, 6 very distinct secret technologies, and lots of fun little RPG kind of skills and traits that you can tack on. Love it. Very nicely done. Now, when you finally get into the game, things kick off with a rather beautiful example of the title in action. Your faction makes Planetfall in a spectacular way. It never gets old. Now, that landing point is your first settlement, and you use that settlement to build buildings, recruit units, or generate resources. Energy, cosmite, research, and influence are accumulated on an empire level, with food, production, happiness, and population working at a city level. Now, all the resources are generated in a variety of means depending on what you build and research, and they are spent for various construction projects, recruitment drives, scientific research, and unit upgrades. If you've ever played a 4X or empire building game like Civilization, things will feel familiar here outside of one crucial element. The map in Age of Wonders Planetfall is divided into sectors. These sectors can either be unowned and neutral, or they can be home to settlements, and beyond that, they can also be taken by using forward operating bases or annexed and exploited for their resources as long as they're close enough to one of your settlements. As a settlement grows in population using the food resource, it's able to annex more sectors with the help of units who have to physically go out and accomplish the task. So you have to manage the population growth against happiness, and since you can only produce one thing at a time in a city, you have to balance your construction against training units or the developing of annexed sectors, which you also have to do from the settlement that the sector is attached to. And since a settlement can only annex sectors up to 2 steps away, you will eventually have to build more colonizers to go out there and build more settlements, rinse and repeat. Sectors all have their own geographical features, which result in them producing various amounts of the different resources, and sometimes they'll be host to landmarks or special structures that make them more lucrative from a strategic perspective for certain purposes. I feel like the sector system creates potential flashpoints for war a lot more readily than individual, smaller resource tiles, and to exploit a sector, basically, a faction has to annex all of it. And because that's an all-or-nothing kind of a setup, the race for good spots is on right from the start, especially on some of these smaller map sizes, and factions in close proximity to one another are going to start feeling the friction real fast. In fact, annexation isn't the only way to claim a sector. As I mentioned earlier, you can also build a forward operating base, and that simply puts up a structure that, while it doesn't let you exploit the sector and its resources, it does force any would-be usurper to fight for control over the sector, forcing them into a war. So it's a nice way to sort of stake a claim on a sector that you'll want to get to eventually, or it's a good way to slow your enemies or future enemies down, I guess, before they're able to take stuff that might help them out. So there's a good bit of clever planning and plotting involved there as well, which I really like to see in these kinds of games. Now, as you're going around annexing these sectors, you'll come across various NPCs. Apart from the other factions in the game, there are marauders that are built up of a variety of unit types from different factions, and they act as barbarians that'll often attack you or might stand guard around resources that you might want to collect for yourself, or they might actually occupy the structures in these sectors, and you have to defeat these armies to actually open that structure up so you can take advantage of it. Apart from these sort of barbarian-style marauders, there are other NPC factions like the Paragon or the Sci-Fi who might offer you quests. Now, you can, of course, decline these quests, or you can try and take them on and try to accomplish them to gain some reward or another. This includes resources, units, mods, equipment, etc., etc. And the quests themselves are quite varied as well. Some involve exploring far-off sectors, others involve liberating certain landmarks, while others still might involve improving relations or destroying specific armies on the map. These quests do feel quite RPG-esque in a sense. You don't have to do them, they are side quests after all, but should you choose to do them to reap the reward, you might have to go out of your way. This becomes a balancing act for you as a player. Are the rewards worth the distraction? Sometimes, especially in the early game, it's an easy decision. These rewards might help with your empire building efforts from the get-go, give you a nice head start. Rewards will sometimes include units of a different faction entirely, units that you can't recruit yourself, with abilities that you might never have access to otherwise. On top of all of that, the quests can also give a certain sense of direction for those who might otherwise feel uncertain about what to do next. They give micro-objectives for the player to pursue, and they prevent the gameplay loop from getting stale too quickly. Beyond the quests and the fighting, some NPCs, as in actual hero characters, will occasionally contact you looking for an employer, giving you a chance to gain more hero characters for your cause. When you eventually come across the other factions themselves, your options are plentiful. Diplomatic options like non-aggression pacts, trading information and resources, vassalization, sending insults, those are all par for the course. And as with many games that Paradox is involved with, if you're ever going to declare war, you need to have a casus belli, so you actually have to have a reason to declare war, otherwise you suffer some penalties to the overall happiness of your people and things like that. So that's another little element that this game does differently to others in the same subgenre. Now, some NPC factions, like the Paragon or Sci-Fi that I mentioned earlier, actually have stores from which you can buy things, including units and mods and technologies and things like that, and that depends on how good your relations are with them. And you can also request side quests for them to further your relations as well. So you'll sort of try to get your relations good with some of these NPC factions so that you can buy special equipment off of them, and you do that by either paying tribute or by talking to them through the diplomacy screens, or, like I said, by doing some quests for them. And now that I've mentioned mods a couple of times, let's talk a little bit about the whole unit modding system, because that's something I'm personally a big fan of. I've loved it ever since I played Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, where you could, I believe that was the one where you could build your own unit types and stuff. I think that adds a little bit of personality, and in this game, every unit, including heroes, can be upgraded using various items that you obtain either through completing quests, exploring, or researching technologies in either one of the two simultaneous technology trees, one for military progress and one for social progress. Now, up to 3 mods can be added onto a unit, and though these mods are sometimes restricted to specific unit types, there is a great number of combinations you can make, allowing you to customize units for specific tasks, balancing the cost of recruiting the upgraded version. Obviously, when you add upgrades to a unit, it becomes more expensive to maintain and to actually recruit, so you're playing this balancing act of like, do I need these mods on every unit in my army, or just some of them that act as these specialized troops? So again, there's a bit of a balancing act there, and I'm all about those balancing acts in games like this, trying to find that perfect balance that feels good and plays good as well. Now, the standard starting units, as a result of these modifications, can quickly become mid or late game units, and the mods again allow you to customize entire armies sometimes for specific tasks, specific enemy types, specific types of resistances or damage dealing capabilities. Apart from that, you're also able to change your characters by modding them as well. Again, they have 3 mod slots. You can also change their equipment, give them mounts as well, and you can upgrade their skills as they gain more experience through, over time in battles. Now, skills include things like healing buffs, faster movement, and it goes right up to things like better piloting capabilities for vehicles and mounts, or buffs for specific unit types, or even new abilities to use in battle. Now, that means that some of these characters will be better suited for specific army compositions based on how you've spec'd them. So, yet again, one more thing to manage, and another thing that really fleshes out characters, and that's something I'm a big fan of, is when a character has a certain feel to them, and so you assign a certain army type to them, give them certain tasks, and it's just cool to see that sort of grow and evolve as you play a game, and as you get attached to your various armies and the various people involved. Now, as somebody who likes tinkering a lot, I'm a big fan of both unit modding and the character leveling system. I think it brings an extra bit of life and personalization to every playthrough, and it compounds the number of styles or approaches, I guess, that can be taken. Of course, there's a min-max approach for those who want to take it, but again, as a bit of a role player and tinkerer, I like experimenting with different setups that add flavor. Now, let's step away from the empire building gameplay for a moment to see how these armies actually behave in combat. When 2 armies on opposite sides of a war move to the same hex, battle begins. You can either auto-resolve battles if you don't care to fight one, or you can actually go into manually duke it out in XCOM-style turn-based tactical combat. The auto-resolve battles consider the units and their relative strengths when determining what happens, and I found it to be quite fair, never really getting frustrated at unfair losses, and that's a good thing, because once the novelty wears off, you'll want to leave the easy wins and less important battles to the auto-resolver. So I'm very happy to say that I never once felt cheated by the auto-resolve system. Now, should you fight, deployment zones are determined by where the armies were placed on the campaign map, so to speak, when the engagement began. So if you want to pull off a pincer maneuver or a flanking maneuver or come in from the front and the rear, you can set it up by appropriately placing multiple army stacks before triggering the fight. While this doesn't quite work the same for city fights, it means that open field battles do have an extra layer of strategic thinking to them. Now, once in battle, you'll find the traditional hallmarks of this kind of gameplay, but as with everything else, there's lots of excellent extras to make things really special. So there's full and partial cover, weapons and abilities with limited ranges, accuracy changing over distance, overwatch modes to prevent the enemy free reign of the area, and of course, unique unit abilities, resistances, damage types, and status effects. All of these abilities are affected by various factors: unit mods, technology research, unit experience, commander skill, and on top of that, the battlefield itself might also be out to get you or assist you. Certain tiles may cause damage if you pass through them, while in some cases entire maps might cause damage across the board every few turns because of the terrain or area where the battle is taking place. This is especially neat because if you spec your units appropriately, this can be used to your advantage. For example, if you have resistance to fire damage, you might want to pick fights on geothermally unstable regions because that's where fire damage comes about every couple of turns, and it might only hurt your enemy, whereas you are able to resist the damage. So again, just it's adding this extra layer of thinking that you can involve yourself in if you want to. And then, of course, there's the off-map assistance you can get from tactical operations that you unlock through technology as well, and these often provide you with crucial battle assistance and can turn certain defeat into victory. The battlefields feel appropriately sized. They're not too small where you're just going at the enemy because there's really nothing else to do, and they're not so large where a tiny skirmish becomes a slog of a fight. I do wish armies started more than a couple turns out of the average firing range, but that's a minor quibble. The maps are quite varied too, which prevents battles from becoming too similar too fast, and that was another big concern of mine, was how many map variants are there really, and how quickly does it just become the same map over and over again? The answer is not very much at all. Overall, this integration of battles really makes the game feel unique, and other games have tried to do a similar thing in the past, but I'm very pleased to see and say that the integration is really well done here, and it's not just thrown together. This may be a staple for other Age of Wonders games, but it's still worth highlighting as a highlight, and it's especially so for those of you who are unfamiliar with these games, as I was going into Age of Wonders Planetfall. Now, the game is, of course, not without its issues. I can happily say, however, that most of these issues are minor. Most. One issue that really stood out to me was that for everything that Age of Wonders Planetfall does to make the factions feel unique and special, for some reason, there's a fair bit of overlap when it comes to the society tech tree. Military tech trees are different enough, but about 90% of the society tech tree is the same across the board, unlocking the same capabilities across all factions. The secret technology you choose before starting the game also provides certain tech options that'll be consistent across factions with the same secret technology option. And that leaves like 5 or so faction-specific technologies in the society tech tree. Now, a similar situation exists with buildings and structures used to exploit sectors, and that just feels very immersion-breaking. There will be some faction-specific options, and then no matter if you're a human or a hive-mind insect, you'll build barracks or defense turrets or hydroponics farms. Not only are they the same in function, but they're also the same in name, and that really seems like a missed opportunity. Even if all the buildings do the same things, they should at least be named differently. There should be more of a push towards asymmetry there. Maybe I'm missing a trick here, but it just feels like, again, just a little bit of a missed opportunity. Now, apart from that, the voice acting is honestly a little hit and miss.
Our forces are victorious.
Our forces are victorious.
Our forces are victorious.
I would say maybe it's more miss than hit with certain factions. There aren't too many voice lines, so there's a fair bit of voice clip repetition, and when those repeated voice clips are read poorly on top of that, it does feel a little chuckle-worthy in the bad way. My last issue is perhaps a matter of opinion. At times, the pacing feels a little off because of animation speeds and the inability to skip or speed them up, at least as far as I could see. So, as great as the game looks and feels, seeing the same animation every time somebody has to move or shoot in a game like this, where that's 80% of what's happening, it's a little unfortunate. This is kind of par for the course with this style of game, I know, but I do wish I was able to skip the animations after the 10th time of giving a move order to a particularly slow unit that has to amble across the terrain. Nothing game-breaking to report over here, just minor issues and a little bit of immersion breaking that is rather unfortunate. In all honesty, though, this kind of stuff can actually be patched out with an update, free or not. So hopefully they do something like that. Just, again, I like to get really immersed, so it's kind of weird when you're playing as the bug faction, or, the faction that modifies biology, and you're also making a hydroponics farm. It's just kind of strange. Doesn't gel. Now, moving on from that, I would like to say that the game does look very fantastic. Everything from the user interface to the world is very pleasing to the eye. I especially like the user interface. I'm very picky about UI, and I'm so glad to see that we are past the era of crappy strategy game UI. Some of the character models are a little rough around the edges, which is especially noticeable in the diplomacy screens. And outside of some of those voice acting issues, though, I would say the audio is very spot on, especially the music. I'm a big fan of the mix of synthwave and rock and roll. It's a solid OST, I'd say. Now, I think there are a couple of things that deserve special mention, just real quickly. One, the writing in the game, top notch. From the little quotes related to unit descriptions or technology to the conversations that happen between characters in the campaigns and the actual, world building as well. It's all very nicely done with very cool lore to explore as well, with none of it feeling boring or like a drag or just, silly even. And one more thing worth mentioning is the sense of humor. The game has one. It takes itself serious in all the right ways, but it's not afraid to have some fun with some character models, with some of the descriptive writing, and even some of the options and equipment. Having a chopper as a mount, and I mean like a motorbike chopper as a mount for your heroes, or having a confetti launcher that has like the note festivity every time it makes a good hit, that's a weapon in the game. And this is all just the right touch of cheeky humor that just adds a bit of character, a bit of extra character on top of an already characterful game. I love it. Now, if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know that I stay away from numerical scores because I find them a little bit, arbitrary. They create strange comparisons between games that make no sense. Instead, I like to focus on the fun factor and the value for money. Was the game fun, and would I recommend it? Absolutely yes. I am a big fan of the whole blend of empire building and battle fighting. The Total War series is among my favorites for this very reason, and I'm also a big fan of the Civilization series, and if you're familiar with this channel, you will have seen countless XCOM-style games being played and anticipated. This game hits all the right notes across all of my strategy gaming interests, and it does a good job of all of them. So it's hard not to recommend, really. On top of that, the game pays attention to the little details. The writing, the audio, the fun factor, it's all there. The different races are interesting, the secret technologies feel intriguing, and the RPG elements help keep things feeling fresh. There's lots to do on the empire building side of things, so it doesn't get stale there, and the tactical battles offer a great change of pace every once in a while. Neither part feels like the afterthought either, which was one of my main concerns, but no, both aspects tie together nicely. I'd absolutely love to see more factions and secret technologies added to the game through DLC down the line, and I'm quite curious to see the level of modding support that comes through as well. I think Age of Wonders Planetfall really hits it out of the park, and it's actually got me wanting to purchase and play the older games in the series. I hope this review has helped you make a call regarding Age of Wonders Planetfall, and if not, there's a Let's Play I'll be kicking off that might give you some more insight into how the game plays and feels. If you decide to pick it up, consider using that Humble Bundle link I mentioned in the description and under the I at the top right corner of the screen to support the channel and charity as you do. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more strategy gaming reviews, previews, let's plays, and more. A massive thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel on a monthly basis. You keep us alive and running smoothly, and a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.